David Reeves adjusted his simple gray uniform and walked through the gleaming corridors of the council building. Every surface reflected light from unknown sources, and the walls seemed to hum with power beyond human understanding. He had made this walk 1,000 times, but today felt different. Today he carried another rejection letter, another denial of basic rights for his people. The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years. 3 ancient races controlled everything: the massive reptilian Draknari with their armored scales and cold eyes, the crystalline Vorthak who spoke through vibrations that hurt human ears, and the energy beings called Luminae, who existed as pure light and thought. They called themselves the Hegemony, and they decided the fate of every living creature in known space. 50 years ago, humans had arrived as refugees. Earth was dying, poisoned by wars and waste, and humanity needed a new home. The Council had shown mercy, or so they called it. They gave humans the right to live on empty worlds at the edge of space, far from the important systems. In return, humans would serve as workers, never as equals. David reached the great chamber where the Council met. The doors opened without a sound, revealing a vast space filled with beings that defied imagination. Prime Counselor Thekvar sat on a throne made from a single black crystal, his massive form covered in scales that shifted color with his mood. Today they were deep red, which meant annoyance. Human Ambassador. Thekvar's voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. You waste our time again with your requests. David stepped forward and placed a data pad on the speaking platform. Honored Counselor, I come with a simple request. The human colony on Kepler Prime needs medical supplies. A plague has started and our doctors cannot treat it with the equipment we have. A sound like breaking glass filled the air. It was Zefkol, the Vorthak Admiral, expressing what passed for laughter among his kind. Humans always fall sick. Your bodies are weak, designed for one small world. Perhaps this plague will teach you to stay where you belong. The third member of the ruling council, a being of pure energy called Luxara, spoke without words. Her thoughts entered David's mind directly, cold and dismissive. Your species has been given shelter and protection. That is enough. You ask for technology beyond your understanding. David felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. We ask only for medicine. Human doctors have studied the plague and believe they can cure it, given the right tools. Human doctors, Thekvar repeated, his scales shifting to a darker red. Your people have been forbidden from advanced medical research. You lack the intelligence to use such tools safely. With respect, Counselor, our doctors... Silence. The word hit David like a physical blow. The decision stands. Your colony will receive basic aid when we deem it necessary. No human shall have access to advanced medical technology. This discussion is over. David wanted to argue further, but he knew better. The last human who had raised his voice in this chamber had been sentenced to work in the deep mines of Vorthak space. No one had seen him again. As he left the chamber, David's hands shook with barely controlled anger. In the corridor outside, he met Captain Rosa Martinez. She wore the simple blue uniform of the human security forces, though her weapons were nothing more than basic energy pistols that could barely stop a charging animal, let alone defend against real threats. How did it go? Rosa asked, though she could read the answer on his face. They refused. Again. David started walking toward the transport bay. 300 people are sick on Kepler Prime, and they will not let our doctors help them. Rosa fell into step beside him. Maybe it's time we stopped asking permission. David glanced around quickly. Such words could be considered treason against the Council. We cannot afford to anger them, Rosa. They could remove us from our worlds entirely. And send us where? Back to dead Earth? Rosa's voice was quiet but intense. David, we've been patient for 50 years. We've followed every rule, accepted every insult, worked without complaint, and still they treat us like children who cannot be trusted with anything important. They reached the transport area where Dr. Alan Foster waited with his small medical team. Alan was older than most humans in space, having been among the first refugees to leave Earth. His gray hair and lined face showed the stress of decades spent begging for scraps of knowledge. The answer was no, wasn't it? Alan said without looking up from his medical scanner. They believe humans are too primitive for advanced medicine, David replied. Alan finally looked up, and David was surprised to see not sadness but anger in the old doctor's eyes. Primitive? I've been studying their medical technology for 20 years. I could improve half their treatments if they would let me. But they prefer to let people die rather than admit a human might know something they don't. Keep your voice down, David warned, but he understood the frustration. Every human leader felt it. They had capabilities their alien masters refused to acknowledge. The transport ride back to the human sector was quiet. Through the windows, they could see the massive space stations and gleaming ships of the hegemony. Energy flowed through systems no human was allowed to understand. Wealth beyond imagination passed through trade routes where humans were forbidden to compete. As they approached the human residential area, the contrast was stark. Human buildings were simple and functional, built from basic materials the Council deemed appropriate for a junior species. No advanced technology was visible, no weapons more powerful than those needed for basic security. But David knew there were secrets here. Small laboratories where human scientists worked with salvaged equipment. Hidden workshops where engineers studied alien technology they were forbidden to touch. Communication networks that connected human colonies across space, carrying messages the Council never saw. The colony ship from Earth Sector 7 was denied passage through Council space again, Rosa reported as they reached David's office. They'll have to take the long route through the neutral zone. That adds 6 months to their journey. How many people are on that ship? David asked. 12,000, including 3,000 children. David closed his eyes. The neutral zone was dangerous, filled with pirates and worse things. Ships that took that route often never arrived at their destination. But the Council maintained that human vessels could not use secure hyperspace lanes reserved for important traffic. File another protest, David said automatically. David, Rosa said carefully. What if filing protests isn't enough anymore? Before David could answer, Alan entered the office carrying a small device David had never seen before. It looked like alien technology, but subtly different. What is that? David asked. Alan smiled for the first time in weeks. This is a medical scanner built from components our people have been collecting. It can diagnose the plague on Kepler Prime and tell us exactly how to cure it. You built that? With human technology? Human technology and a few borrowed ideas, Alan said. David, there are things about our capabilities that the Council doesn't know. Things we've been working on for years. David stared at the device. It looked as advanced as anything he had seen in Council laboratories. How is this possible? Because they underestimated us, Rosa said quietly. They always have. For the first time in years, David felt something other than resignation. It was small, fragile, but unmistakable. It was hope. Outside the window, the lights of the great Council stations blazed against the stars, symbols of power that had ruled for millennia. But in this small human office, something new was beginning. Something the ancient rulers had never seen before. Human patience was not infinite, and when it ended, the galaxy would never be the same. The mining facility on asteroid belt 347 had been operating for 3 years. Human workers carved valuable minerals from the floating rocks, while Draknari overseers watched from their comfortable stations. The work was dangerous, the pay was minimal, and the humans knew they were extracting wealth that would never benefit their own people. Marcus Webb wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his oxygen levels. The mining suit was old, patched multiple times and barely adequate for the job. Around him, 24 other humans worked with similar equipment while their Draknari supervisor lounged in an environmental booth with full life support. Webb. The overseer's voice crackled through the comm system. Sector 7 shows high concentrations of trilithium. Take your team there immediately. Marcus nodded and gestured to his crew. They had been friends since childhood on New Geneva, one of the first human colonies. Like most humans in space, they had learned to work together, to watch each other's backs because no one else would. As they moved to the new sector, Marcus noticed something unusual in the rock formation. The mineral deposits were unlike anything he had seen before. The substance glowed with a soft blue light and seemed to pulse with energy. Look at this, whispered Nina, his second in command. This isn't trilithium. Marcus ran his scanner over the deposit. The readings made no sense. Whatever this was, it contained more energy per gram than the most advanced power sources he knew about. This could power a small city for years. They worked carefully extracting samples of the mysterious mineral. Marcus knew they should report the discovery immediately, but something made him hesitate. He had seen what happened when humans found valuable things. The credit always went to someone else. 2 hours later, Overseer Krathek arrived in his protected suit, flanked by 2 Draknari guards. He examined the deposit with expensive scanning equipment, and his scales shifted to bright gold, the color of extreme satisfaction. "Excellent work, humans," Krathek rumbled. "This is purified quantum crystal, extremely rare and valuable. Continue extraction immediately. What will happen to it?" Marcus asked. Krathek looked at him with something like amusement. "It will be processed by proper facilities and sold to appropriate buyers. Humans have no need for such advanced materials." Marcus watched as cargo ships arrived to collect their hard-won discovery. The quantum crystal would probably power Draknari cities or Vorthak warships. The human miners would receive their standard wages and nothing more. That evening, as the human workers gathered in their simple quarters, the anger was almost visible. They had risked their lives to find treasure beyond imagination, and they would receive nothing but the satisfaction of having served their masters well. "How long are we going to accept this?" Nina asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer, but he was thinking the same thing. Meanwhile, on the medical research station orbiting Proxima Beta, Dr. Sarah Kim was making a discovery that would change everything. For months, she had been studying a plague that affected multiple alien species. The disease was spreading across the galaxy, killing millions, and the Council's best scientists could not find a cure. Sarah worked in the human medical facility, which was restricted to basic research only. She could not access the advanced laboratories or expensive equipment available to alien researchers, but she had something they didn't have: a different way of looking at problems. While alien scientists focused on complex technological solutions, Sarah studied the disease itself. She traced its origins, mapped its behavior, and slowly began to understand its weaknesses. Working with equipment she had built herself from salvaged parts, she developed a treatment that was elegant in its simplicity. The cure worked. In test after test, patients recovered completely within days. Sarah had solved a problem that had stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy. Excited and proud, she transmitted her findings to the Council Medical Authority. She explained her research methods, shared her data, and requested permission to begin large-scale production of the cure. The response came within hours. Her research was confiscated. The cure would be credited to Dr. Vektar of the Vorthak Science Academy. Humans were not authorized to conduct independent medical research, and Sarah was ordered to return to basic nursing duties immediately. Sarah stared at the message for a long time. Millions of people were dying, and she had found the answer. But because she was human, her discovery would be stolen and she would be silenced. For the first time in her career, Dr. Sarah Kim began to consider that working within the system might not be enough. On the trade station near the Galactic core, human merchant Captain Lisa Park was learning the same lesson. For 2 years, she had built a profitable trade route between human colonies and neutral worlds. Her ships carried food, manufactured goods, and cultural items that were increasingly popular among species tired of council regulations. The profits allowed human colonies to improve their living conditions and expand their populations. More importantly, the trade routes created relationships with non-council species who treated humans as equals rather than servants. But success made the council nervous. Admiral Zefkul arrived at the trade station with a fleet of warships and new regulations. Human vessels were banned from the 3 most profitable trade lanes. The restrictions would cut human trade income by 70%. "This is for your own protection," the admiral explained to the gathered human merchants. "These trade routes pass through dangerous space where your primitive ships cannot safely travel." Lisa watched her life's work crumble in a single day. The dangerous space was actually the most secure in the galaxy, patrolled by council fleets and protected by automated defense systems. The real danger was that humans were becoming too successful, too independent. That night, as her crew loaded their ships for the long journey to less profitable routes, Lisa made a decision. She activated a hidden communication system and sent a coded message to contacts throughout human space. The message was simple: "The time for playing by their rules is ending." The message reached David Reeves as he sat in his office, reviewing another day of diplomatic failures. 3 more human requests had been denied. A human scientist had been arrested for unauthorized research. 2 human colonies had been placed under enhanced supervision by Council peacekeeping forces David activated. his own hidden communication network, and began to read reports from across human space. The pattern was clear. The Council was tightening its control, limiting human freedom and crushing any sign of independence or success. But the reports also contained other information. Hidden research projects were making breakthrough discoveries. Secret facilities were producing advanced technology. Human military units were training with equipment that officially didn't exist. For 50 years, humans had been patient. They had followed the rules, accepted limitations, and worked within the system. They had hoped that good behavior would eventually earn them respect and equal treatment. But the Council's actions made it clear that this would never happen. No matter how useful humans became, no matter how loyal they would always be seen as servants and subjects. David opened a secure channel to Captain Rosa Martinez and Dr. Alan Foster. When their faces appeared on his screen, he could see they were thinking the same things he was. "How many ships do we have?" David asked quietly. Rosa was quiet for a moment. "More than they think." "How advanced is our technology?" he asked Alan. "More advanced than they believe possible." David nodded slowly. Then perhaps it's time they learned who they've really been dealing with. Across human space, the word spread through hidden networks. In mining stations and research facilities, on trade ships and colony worlds, humans began to prepare for something that had never happened in galactic history. Junior species was about to say no. The ancient rulers, who had controlled the galaxy for millennia, were about to discover that human patience, like all things, had limits. And when those limits were reached, the consequences would reshape the stars themselves. Dr. Alan Foster's hands trembled as he opened the sealed laboratory hidden beneath the New Geneva Medical Center. This facility had been under construction for 30 years, built in secret by teams of human engineers who worked in the dark hours when alien supervisors were absent. What lay beyond the hidden door would change everything. The laboratory stretched for nearly a kilometer underground, filled with equipment that should not have existed. Advanced quantum computers hummed beside medical scanners that could analyze alien DNA in real time. Manufacturing systems assembled components with precision that rivaled the best Council technology, and at the center of it all sat a single chair connected to dozens of neural interface cables. "Alan, what is this place?" David Reeves asked as he stepped into the laboratory for the first time. "This is where we learned the truth about ourselves," Alan replied, his voice filled with wonder and fear. "David, humans are not what the Council thinks we are. We're not primitive. We're not limited. We're something they've never encountered before." Captain Rosa Martinez examined a workstation covered with alien technology components that had been taken apart and rebuilt. "How long has this been going on?" "Since the beginning," Alan said. "Since the first day we arrived in Council space and they gave us our appropriate technology. We started studying everything they gave us, learning how it worked and discovering that we could not only understand it but improve it." David picked up a device that looked familiar, but wrong. It resembled a Council communication unit, but sleeker and more efficient. "You've been reverse engineering their technology?" "More than that," Alan said, walking to the neural interface chair. "We've been learning that human brains work differently than any other species in the galaxy. Watch this." Alan sat in the chair and activated the neural connections. Immediately, screens around the laboratory came to life, displaying data streams from across human space. But these weren't simple computer readouts. The information flowed and shifted as Alan's thoughts guided it, creating connections and patterns that no traditional computer could process. "Alien species are locked into their own technological paths," Alan explained as data flowed around him. "The Draknari build everything around brute force and durability. The Vorthek use crystalline matrices for everything. The Lumini work only with energy systems. Each species can only truly understand technology built by their own kind." "But humans are different?" David asked. "Humans can understand everything." Alan's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Our neural plasticity, our ability to adapt and learn, means we can interface with any technology no matter who built it. We can study a Draknari power core and not only understand how it works but see ways to make it better. We can examine Vorthek communication crystals and improve their efficiency by orders of magnitude." Rosa was examining what looked like a weapon, but unlike anything she had seen before. "Are you saying we can build technology superior to theirs?" "I'm saying we already have," Alan replied. "Rosa, activate panel 7. Rosa touched the indicated control and a section of the laboratory wall slid aside. Beyond it lay a hangar that stretched into darkness, filled with shapes that made David's breath catch in his throat. Ships. Dozens of sleek vessels that combined elements from every known technology in the galaxy. They were beautiful and deadly, with hull designs that seemed to flow like liquid metal and weapon systems that glowed with barely contained energy. How many facilities like this exist? David asked in amazement. 143, Rosa answered, hidden beneath colonies built into asteroid mining operations, concealed in the cargo holds of merchant ships. David, we've been preparing for this day for decades. Alan stood and deactivated the neural interface. Every piece of technology the Council has given us, every restriction they've placed on our research, every time they've treated us like children who couldn't understand complex systems, we've been learning, we've been adapting, and we've been building. David walked among the ships, noting details that should have been impossible. Hull plating that seemed to shift and flow, weapon systems that combined energy types no single species had ever mastered, shield generators that used principles from 3 different technological traditions. These ships could match anything in the Council fleet, David said. They could do more than match them, Rosa replied. David, we've run simulations. Ship for ship, our vessels are superior to anything the hegemony has built. We've had 50 years to study their weaknesses and design around them. Alan activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy with thousands of small lights scattered across human space. Every one of those lights is a hidden facility, a secret research station or a concealed military base. We have shipyards in empty star systems, weapons factories in asteroid belts, and research centers that the Council has never detected. But how? David asked. How have we hidden all of this from their surveillance? Because they've never bothered to look carefully, Rosa said with bitter satisfaction. They see us as harmless servants. They assume we're too primitive to build anything threatening. Their own arrogance has been our greatest protection. Alan brought up another display showing communication networks. We've also been monitoring all Council communications for 30 years. Their military codes, their diplomatic messages, their strategic planning. We've seen it all. They have no secrets from us. David stared at the displays, overwhelmed by the scope of what his people had accomplished. Why wasn't I told about this before? Because until now we hoped it would never be necessary, Alan replied. We wanted to believe that patience and diplomacy would eventually work. But recent events have made it clear that the Council will never accept us as equals. Rosa activated a communication system, and David heard voices from across human space. Military commanders reporting fleet readiness, scientists sharing breakthrough discoveries, colony leaders preparing defensive systems. The hidden network of human resistance was vast and sophisticated. How many people know about this? David asked. Everyone who needs to know, Rosa replied. David, do you think the miners who discovered that quantum crystal didn't take samples for themselves? Do you think Dr. Sarah Kim was the only human researcher making breakthrough discoveries? Do you think the merchant captains being pushed out of trade routes weren't finding other ways to move cargo? Alan smiled grimly. The Council has spent 50 years training us to be the perfect servants. They taught us to work quietly, to avoid attention, to accomplish tasks without supervision. They never realized we might use those same skills against them. A new voice entered the conversation as Dr. Sarah Kim appeared on the communication screen from her hidden laboratory. Alan, we've completed the analysis of Council military bioweapons. Not only can we defend against them, but we've developed countermeasures that will protect all species. Another screen activated, showing Merchant Captain Lisa Park speaking from the bridge of a ship that looked nothing like the simple cargo vessel she was supposed to command. Trade networks are in position. We have supply lines that can support military operations across the galaxy, and the Council doesn't even know they exist. David watched as more and more human leaders checked in from facilities and operations that officially didn't exist. The scope of the secret human resistance was staggering. For decades, while appearing to be obedient servants, humans had been building the infrastructure for independence. When do we begin? David asked, finally understanding that the question was not whether humans would resist, but when. That depends on you, Rosa replied. You're still our official representative to the Council. The final decision has to be yours. David thought about 50 years of humiliation, rejection, and condescension. He thought about the plague victims who had died while Dr. Sarah's cure was stolen. He thought about the miners whose discoveries enriched their oppressors. He thought about the thousands of refugees still traveling dangerous routes because the Council deemed them unworthy of safe passage. "The Council meeting is tomorrow," David said finally. "They're voting on new restrictions that would limit human population growth and require genetic monitoring of our children." "Decree 847, Alan said grimly. "We've been monitoring their discussions. They want to control human evolution, prevent us from developing further." David nodded. "Then tomorrow we give them our answer." As he prepared to leave the hidden facility, David looked back at the ships, the technology, and the displays showing human capabilities the Council had never imagined. For 50 years, humans had been the galaxy's patient servants, but patience was not the same as weakness and service was not the same as surrender. Tomorrow, the ancient rulers of the galaxy would learn what humans had really been doing in their spare time, and nothing would ever be the same. The Great Council Chamber had seen many historic moments in its 10,000-year history, but nothing like what was about to unfold. David Reeves walked through the massive doors wearing his simple gray diplomatic uniform, but today he carried himself differently. His steps were firm, his shoulders straight, and his eyes held a confidence that made several alien observers take notice. Prime Counselor Thekvar lounged on his crystal throne, his scales the deep gold of satisfaction. Today would see the passage of Decree 847, which would finally put the troublesome human species under proper control. Around the chamber, representatives from hundreds of species watched as the drama unfolded. "Human ambassador," Thekvar rumbled with barely concealed pleasure. "You come before us at a historic moment. Today we shall vote on measures to ensure the proper development of your species." David stepped to the speaking platform and activated the projection system. Instead of the usual simple data pad, he produced a device that made several council members shift uncomfortably. It was clearly advanced technology, but not of any design they recognized. "Honored counselors," David began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, "I come before you today to deliver humanity's response to Decree 847. Admiral Zefkol's crystalline form vibrated with amusement. "Your response? Humans do not have the authority to respond to council decrees. You will comply as always." David smiled, and something in that expression made the ancient alien pause. "Admiral, humanity has complied with your demands for 50 years. We have served faithfully, worked without complaint, and accepted every limitation you have placed upon us. But Decree 847 crosses a line we cannot accept." "You cannot accept?" Thekvar's scales shifted to angry red. "You dare to refuse a council decree?" "I do more than refuse it," David replied calmly. "I formally reject the authority of this council to control human reproduction, education, or development." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Never in recorded history had a protected species openly defied the council. But David wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, raising his voice over the chaos, "humanity hereby withdraws from all previous agreements and treaties with the Galactic Council. We claim our right to self-determination as a free and independent species." Luxara, the energy being, projected her thoughts directly into every mind in the chamber. The mental voice was cold with fury. "Impossible. Humans lack the technology and military capability to survive without council protection. You will return to your designated worlds immediately and accept Decree 847, or face the consequences." David activated his device, and the chamber's main display screen came to life. What appeared there made every council member stare in shock. The screen showed a real-time view of space around the council's primary military base at Hegemony Station. The massive fortress was surrounded by the pride of the council fleet, thousands of warships that had never known defeat. But today, they were not alone. Emerging from empty space like ghosts becoming solid, human ships appeared around the council fleet. They were beautiful and terrible, their hull designs flowing like liquid metal, their weapon systems glowing with barely contained power. Within minutes, the council's mighty fleet was surrounded by vessels they had never seen before. "This is impossible," Admiral Zefkol vibrated. "Our sensors detected nothing." "Where did these ships come from?" "They've been there all along," David replied. "Hidden by technology you've never encountered, crewed by humans you believed incapable of such achievements." The display changed to show similar scenes throughout the galaxy. At every major council military base, Human fleets were appearing from stealth systems that made them invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. Thekvar rose from his throne, his massive form radiating fury. Trickery. Even if you have stolen some ships, humans lack the knowledge to operate advanced technology. Your vessels will be captured easily. David's smile widened. Would you like to test that theory? Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the council chamber. The station's automated defense systems had detected massive energy signatures approaching from multiple directions. Admiral Zefkol activated his command interface, and his crystalline form flickered as he processed incoming data. Impossible. Human ships are hacking our defense networks. They're taking control of our own systems. On the main display, they watched as Dr. Alan Foster's face appeared. He was sitting in what looked like a human facility, but surrounded by technology that combined elements from every known species in the galaxy. Greetings, council members, Alan said pleasantly. Please don't attempt to activate your weapons. We've taken the liberty of installing some safety protocols in your systems. Throughout council space, the impossible was happening. Human technicians were accessing alien computer networks that were supposed to be unhackable. Human ships were jamming communication systems that had operated flawlessly for millennia. Human engineers were taking control of defense platforms that protected the most secure worlds in the galaxy. How? Luxura demanded, her energy form fluctuating with shock. Human brains cannot process our technology. You lack the neural capacity. Dr. Alan Foster laughed, and the sound was not entirely pleasant. We lack the neural capacity? Do you know what we've been doing for the past 50 years while you dismissed us as primitive servants? The display changed again, showing hidden facilities throughout human space. Vast shipyards and empty star systems, research laboratories beneath colonial settlements, manufacturing centers hidden in asteroid belts. The scope of human achievement was staggering. We've been learning, Alan continued. Every piece of technology you've given us, every system you've allowed us to maintain, every device you've let us touch, we've studied and improved upon. We've discovered something you never knew about yourselves. What do you mean? Thekvar demanded. You're limited, David replied, returning attention to himself. Each of your species can only truly understand technology built by your own kind. Draknari build for strength. Vorthak use crystalline matrices. Lumini work with pure energy. You're trapped by your own biological imperatives. Alan's image nodded. But humans are different. We adapt, we learn. We take your technologies and make them better. Did you know that we've improved the efficiency of Draknari power cores by 40%? Did you know we can manufacture Vorthak crystals that are twice as pure as anything you've ever created? The council members stared in shock as more displays showed human innovations. Medical devices that surpassed anything in council hospitals. Communication systems that operated faster than supposedly impossible limits. Weapons that combine principles from multiple technological traditions. You've been studying us for 50 years, Rosa Martinez said as her face appeared on another screen. She was standing on the bridge of a ship that moved through space with impossible grace. You cataloged our limitations, analyzed our weaknesses, and concluded we were harmless. But you never understood our greatest strength, which is? Admiral Zefkol asked weakly. We refuse to accept that anything is impossible, Rosa replied. You told us we couldn't understand your technology, so we learned it. You said we couldn't improve your design, so we built better ones. You claimed we couldn't defend ourselves, so we created weapons you've never imagined. David stepped closer to the council platform. For 50 years, we hoped you would eventually treat us as equals. We believed that patience and good service would earn us respect. But we also prepared for the possibility that you would never change. This is rebellion, Thekvar snarled. We will crush your ships and return your species to proper control. With what ships? David asked mildly. Your fleets are surrounded and outgunned. Your defense networks are under our control. Your communication systems are being monitored by our technicians. As if to prove his point, the chamber's lights flickered and changed color. The environmental system shifted, making the air slightly cooler. Throughout the station, human voices could be heard over the communication systems, politely explaining to alien personnel that their facilities were now under new management. You cannot maintain this, Luxara projected desperately. Your resources are limited. Your numbers are small. David activated his device again, and new images appeared on the display. Ships emerging from hidden bases throughout the galaxy. Not just human ships, but vessels carrying the flags of dozens of species that had lived under council rule. We're not alone, David explained. Many species have grown tired of council restrictions. They've been waiting for someone to make the first move. The display showed celebration on worlds throughout the galaxy as the news spread. Species that had been denied their own technology. Civilizations that had been forced to trade only with council-approved partners. Colonies that had been restricted to designated worlds. All of them were declaring their independence. "This is chaos," Thekvar roared. "The galaxy needs order. Without the council, there will be war and destruction." "There will be freedom," David replied. "Freedom to develop as we choose. Freedom to trade with whom we please. Freedom to explore the galaxy without asking permission from species who believe they own the stars." Admiral Zefkul's form flickered as he processed more reports. "Human forces are moving against our administrative centers. They're liberating restricted technology, freeing controlled populations, opening sealed trade routes." David nodded. "The age of the hegemony is over. Today begins the age of the Free Species Alliance." As alarms continued to sound throughout the chamber, as reports came in of human forces achieving impossible victories across the galaxy, as the display showed the greatest military reversal in recorded history, David Reeves stood calmly before the ancient rulers who had controlled the stars for 10,000 years. "You have a choice," he said simply. "You can adapt to the new reality or you can be swept aside by it. But you will never again control humanity." The council that had ruled the galaxy for millennia stared at the small human who had just announced the end of their empire, and for the first time in their long lives they began to understand what it meant to be afraid. The war began not with a single battle, but with 1,000 simultaneous strikes across the galaxy. In star systems that had known only council rule for millennia, human fleets appeared from empty space and began systematically dismantling the infrastructure of oppression. Captain Rosa Martinez stood on the bridge of the Defiant Hope, watching as her task force approached the industrial world of Krentak Prime. For 300 years, this planet had been a slave labor camp where millions of beings from dozens of species worked in factories that produced weapons for the Council fleet. "Orbital defenses are targeting us," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Chen Park. "Let them," Rosa replied calmly. "Show them what we've learned." The massive defense platforms that protected Krentak Prime opened fire with energy beams that could destroy conventional warships in seconds. But the human vessels didn't try to dodge or block the attacks. Instead, they absorbed them. "Hull plating is converting their energy to our power systems," Chen reported with satisfaction. "We're actually getting stronger," Rosa smiled grimly. 50 years of studying Council technology had taught humans many things, including how to turn the enemy's weapons against them. The adaptive hull plating on human ships could absorb and redirect almost any energy attack. "Return fire," Rosa ordered, "but target the defense platforms only. No strikes against the planet itself." The human weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of brute force energy blasts, they fired precisely targeted beams that shut down systems without destroying them. Within minutes, the orbital defenses around Krentak Prime went silent. "Open a channel to the planet," Rosa commanded. The view screen flickered to life, showing the terrified face of Overseer Drexcal, the Draknari administrator who controlled the slave labor operations. "You cannot do this," Drexcal stammered. "This world is under Council protection. You have no authority here." "I have the only authority that matters," Rosa replied. "The authority of beings who refuse to accept slavery as normal." As her words were broadcast planet-wide, something remarkable happened. In factories across Krentak Prime, workers from dozens of species stopped their tasks and looked up at the screens showing human ships in orbit. For the first time in centuries, they saw hope. "You are making a terrible mistake," Drexcal warned. "The Council fleet will come. You cannot protect this world forever." "We don't need to protect it forever," Rosa said. "We only need to protect it long enough." Human landing craft descended to the planet's surface, but they didn't carry invasion forces. Instead, they brought medical supplies, food, and most importantly, technology. Within hours, the former slaves were receiving training on weapons and communication systems that would allow them to defend themselves. Dr. Sarah Kim coordinated the medical relief efforts from her mobile hospital ship. She had come to Krentak Prime to treat the injuries and illnesses that resulted from centuries of forced labor. But she found herself doing something more important: teaching. "The bone deformation is caused by working with heavy machinery without proper support," she explained to a group of alien doctors who had been denied access to advanced medical knowledge. "But watch this." Sarah activated a human-designed healing device that used principles adapted from Lumini energy technology and Vorthak crystalline matrices. Within minutes, broken bones were mending and damaged organs were repairing themselves. "How is this possible?" asked Dr. Velthera, a member of a species that had been classified as medically primitive by the Council. "Your people understand biological systems better than any other species in the galaxy," Sarah replied. "The Council just never let you have the tools to use that knowledge. We're going to change that." Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Human forces weren't conquering worlds. They were liberating them. More importantly, they were sharing technology and knowledge that had been hoarded by the Council for millennia. On the trade world of New Castor, Merchant Captain Lisa Park was helping establish new trade routes that bypassed Council restrictions entirely. For the first time in galactic history, species could trade directly with each other without paying tribute to their alien masters. "The profit margins are incredible," reported her business partner, Kextar of the Zelian Republic. "Without Council taxes and restrictions, we can offer fair prices to everyone." But the Council was not accepting its losses quietly. Admiral Zefkol assembled the largest fleet in galactic history and prepared for a counterattack that would crush the human rebellion once and for all. The Battle of the Hegemony Core began when 1,000 Council warships dropped out of hyperspace near the original human colony of New Geneva. The planet held no strategic value, but it was the symbolic heart of human civilization in space. "They want to make an example of us," Rosa observed as she watched the massive fleet approach. Her own forces were outnumbered 10-1, and any conventional military analysis would have predicted complete human defeat. But nothing about this war was conventional. "All ships, activate Protocol 7, Rosa commanded. Across the human fleet, vessels that had appeared to be simple warships began to transform. Hull sections folded back to reveal advanced manufacturing bays. Support ships connected to form massive construction platforms. Within hours, the human fleet was building new ships faster than the Council forces could destroy them. Impossible. Admiral Zefkol vibrated as his sensors detected human vessels literally growing in number during the battle. "Ships cannot be constructed in space combat. They can if you understand quantum manufacturing principles," replied Dr. Alan Foster from his command ship. "Another little innovation your people never developed." The battle became a nightmare for Council forces. Every ship they destroyed was replaced by 2 more. Every weapon system they knocked out was rebuilt with improvements. Human vessels that were damaged simply incorporated the wreckage into new, stronger designs. But the most shocking moment came when Admiral Zefkol's flagship was surrounded by human vessels that began communicating directly with his ship's computer systems. "What are they doing?" Zefkol demanded. His technical officer's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "They're talking to our ship. The computer systems are responding to them as if they were authorized users." Within minutes, the Admiral found himself locked out of his own vessel as human technicians took control of every system on board. His flagship, along with dozens of other Council vessels, simply switched sides in the middle of the battle. "How?" Zefkol asked in despair as he was escorted to a holding area by his own security robots, which were now following human commands. "Because we understand your technology better than you do," Alan explained patiently. "We've been studying it for 50 years, remember? We know every weakness, every backdoor, every design flaw. The defeat at New Geneva marked the beginning of the end for Council military power. Across the galaxy, human forces were achieving impossible victories through superior technology, better tactics, and, most importantly, the support of species that had been waiting centuries for liberation. The war wasn't just about military conquest. Human scientists were solving problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Dr. Sarah Kim developed treatments for genetic disorders that affected dozens of species. Human engineers created communication systems that allowed previously incompatible species to work together effectively. Most importantly, humans were sharing everything they learned. Instead of hoarding technological advantages like the Council had done, humanity freely distributed knowledge and innovations to any species that wanted them. "Why do you give us these gifts?" asked Ambassador Nextara of the Phylos Collective as she examined plans for advanced agricultural systems that could feed her people for generations. "Because freedom isn't something you can keep to yourself," David Reeves replied. Either everyone is free, or no one truly is. The psychological impact of human generosity was as devastating to council morale as any military defeat. For 10,000 years, the hegemony had maintained power by controlling access to advanced technology. But humans were proving that cooperation was more powerful than control. As the war entered its final phase, Prime Counselor Thekvar found himself trapped in his palace on the Draknari homeworld, watching as his empire crumbled around him. His fleets were defecting to the human cause. His colonies were declaring independence. His own people were beginning to question why they had ever believed themselves superior to other species. "How did we lose everything so quickly?" he asked his remaining advisors. "Because we never understood what we were fighting," replied General Korthak, one of the few Draknari officers still loyal to the old regime. "We thought we were suppressing a primitive species, but we were actually creating the greatest military force the galaxy has ever seen." Through his palace windows, Thekvar could see human ships in orbit around his homeworld. They weren't bombarding the planet or demanding surrender. They were simply waiting, demonstrating a patience that was somehow more terrifying than any threat. The final message came not from a human military commander, but from Ambassador David Reeves himself. "Prime Counselor," David's image said calmly, "the war is over. Your fleets have surrendered or joined our cause. Your colonies are free. Your people are beginning to understand that strength comes from cooperation, not domination. What do you want from us?" Thekvar asked, his voice hollow with defeat. "The same thing we've always wanted," David replied. "To be treated as equals. To live in freedom. To explore the galaxy without asking permission from self-appointed masters. And if we refuse?" David's expression was sad but determined. "Then you'll become a relic of the past, while the rest of the galaxy moves toward a better future." Looking around his empty palace, seeing the reports of human victories across his former empire, Thekvar realized that the age of the hegemony was truly over. The species he had dismissed as primitive servants had proven to be more advanced, more capable, and more worthy of leadership than any of the ancient rulers. For the first time in his long life, the Prime Counselor of the Galactic Council began to understand what it meant to be humble. The surrender ceremony took place not in the Great Council chamber, where the hegemony had ruled for millennia, but in a simple meeting hall on the neutral world of Haven. David Reeves had chosen the location deliberately. Haven was a small planet that had been ignored by the Council for centuries, populated by refugees and outcasts from dozens of species. Today it would witness the birth of a new galactic order. Prime Counselor Thekvar entered the hall flanked by the remnants of his government. His scales, once the proud gold of absolute authority, had faded to dull gray. Behind him walked Admiral Zefkol and Luxara, the surviving members of the council that had once commanded the obedience of trillions of beings. David stood at a simple wooden podium, wearing not a military uniform or ceremonial robes, but the same gray diplomatic outfit he had worn for 50 years. Around him sat representatives from hundreds of species, many appearing together for the first time in galactic history. "Honored beings," David began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "We gather today not to celebrate victory over our enemies, but to welcome former oppressors as equals in a new community of free species." Thekvar stepped forward, his massive form seeming smaller than it once had. "I do not understand," he rumbled quietly. "You have defeated us completely. Why do you not demand our unconditional surrender?" "Because surrender implies that this was about conquest," David replied. "This was about freedom. Now that freedom has been achieved, there is no need for further conflict." Dr. Sarah Kim rose from her seat among the human delegation. Over the past months, she had been working tirelessly to treat the medical conditions that had developed among council species during their long reign. Centuries of genetic modification and artificial life extension had left many of them physically dependent on technologies they no longer controlled. "Your people are suffering from genetic decay caused by excessive life extension treatments." Sarah addressed the council members directly. "With your permission, we would like to help reverse that damage." Admiral Zefkol's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "You would help us? After what we did to your species?" "Pain is pain," Sarah replied simply. "It doesn't matter who's feeling it." Luxara projected her thoughts into the room, her energy form dimmed by exhaustion and defeat. "We do not deserve such mercy. We treated your people as servants for 50 years. And that's exactly why you need it, said Dr. Alan Foster, as he activated a holographic display showing medical data from across former council space. Mercy isn't something you earn. It's something you give to prove you're better than your worst impulses. The display showed the remarkable medical achievements that had taken place since the war's end. Human doctors were working alongside alien scientists to cure diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Former council technology was being improved and distributed freely to any species that needed it. Captain Rosa Martinez stood next, representing the new Galactic Defense Force that had emerged from the ashes of the old council military. The question isn't what to do with former council forces, she said. The question is how to build something better. You speak of building, Tekvar said, his voice heavy with doubt. But how can there be order without hierarchy? How can there be peace without someone in command? By remembering that strength comes from cooperation, not domination, David replied. He gestured to the assembled representatives, each from species that had once been forbidden from gathering together. Look around this room. Do you see chaos? Do you see war? Indeed, the hall was filled with the sound of productive conversation, as species that had been enemies for centuries worked together to solve common problems. Draknari engineers were sharing construction techniques with Vorthak crystal singers. Luminite energy weavers were collaborating with human quantum physicists. Ambassador Kekstar of the Zelian Republic stood to address the former council members. For 300 years, your people told us we were too violent to be trusted with advanced weapons, too primitive to understand complex technology, too chaotic to govern ourselves. And we believed those things were true, Tekvar admitted. But they weren't, Kekstar continued. We were just different. And difference doesn't mean inferiority. Lisa Park activated a trade analysis display that showed the remarkable economic growth that had occurred since the fall of the Council. Without artificial restrictions and tribute payments, galactic trade has increased by 400%. Species are creating wealth faster than ever before. Because they're trading as equals, added Merchant Prince Velkara of the Outer Rim Collective. No one is demanding tribute or restricting access to profitable routes. Dr. Alan Foster brought up a new display showing technological advancement rates across the galaxy. Scientific progress has accelerated beyond anything we've ever seen. When species share knowledge instead of hoarding it, everyone benefits. We've solved the energy crisis that has limited expansion for millennia, reported Chief Engineer Tamara of the Technical Alliance. By combining Luminite energy weaving with human quantum manipulation and Draknari power core technology, we've created sustainable fusion systems that can power entire star systems. Tekvar listened to report after report of achievements that had seemed impossible under Council rule. Species working together instead of competing, technology being shared instead of controlled, problems being solved instead of managed. How do you maintain order without central authority? He asked finally. The same way a forest maintains order without a single tree being in charge, David replied, through mutual benefit and natural cooperation. But what happens when species disagree? When conflicts arise? Rosa Martinez smiled. We talk to each other. We find compromises. We remember that we're all sharing the same galaxy. And if talking fails, Tekvar pressed. Then we talk some more, David said simply, because the alternative is going back to a system where some species control others. And we've all learned how well that worked. As if to demonstrate the point, a minor dispute broke out in one corner of the hall between representatives of two species that had been enemies for centuries. Within minutes, delegates from other species had gathered to help mediate, and the conflict was resolved through patient discussion and creative compromise. You see, David said, free beings solve problems differently than subjects taking orders. Luxara projected a question that surprised everyone. What happens to us? To the former council members? Whatever you want to happen, Dr. Sarah Kim replied. You're free to return to your homeworlds and live in peace. You're welcome to contribute to the new galactic community. You can research, explore, create, or simply enjoy life without the burden of ruling others. Some of my people are already working with human engineers, admitted Admiral Zefkol. They say it's the first time in centuries they've been allowed to build things instead of just maintaining what already exists. And my researchers are collaborating with species we once considered inferior, Tekvar said quietly. They're learning that intelligence takes many forms. David nodded. That's what we hoped would happen. That former rulers would become simply another voice in the galactic conversation. As the ceremony continued, documents were signed establishing the Free Species Alliance. But these weren't surrender terms or peace treaties. They were agreements for cooperation, frameworks for trade, and principles for resolving conflicts without violence. There is one more thing, David said as the formal proceedings concluded. He activated a final display showing star charts with exploration routes leading beyond the galactic rim. For 10,000 years, Council species focused on controlling what they already knew. But there's an entire universe out there waiting to be explored. Joint exploration missions? Admiral Zeph Cole asked, his crystalline form brightening with interest. Why not? Rosa replied. Human ships with Draknari durability, Vorthak navigation crystals, and Lumini energy systems could go farther than any single species has ever traveled. For the first time since his defeat, Tikvar's scales showed a hint of their old color. Not the gold of dominance, but the blue-green of curiosity and hope. We have spent so long trying to control others, he said slowly, that we forgot the joy of discovering new things. It's never too late to remember, David replied. As the delegates began to leave the hall, they carried with them not the bitter taste of defeat or the hollow satisfaction of victory, but something far more valuable. The promise of a future where every species could reach its full potential. Children across the galaxy would grow up in a universe where their worth was not determined by which species they belonged to, but by their contributions to the common good. Scientists would share discoveries instead of hiding them. Explorers would push the boundaries of known space not for conquest but for knowledge. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, signals were already traveling toward new worlds, carrying messages of friendship from a civilization that had learned to value cooperation over control. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of freedom had begun. Years later, when young beings of all species learned about the Great Liberation in their schools, they would understand that the most important lesson was not about human superiority or council weakness. The lesson was that patience, when combined with courage and determination, could reshape the very foundations of civilization. No alien would ever forget the moment humanity's patience finally ended, but more importantly, no being would ever forget the moment when freedom began.